Friends, few events in world history have been as defining as the American Revolution. It not only gave birth to the first nation-state on the North American continent, but also gave rise to several revolutionary political principles. The United States of America became the first country in the world to adopt a democratic republican system. Prior to this, most of the world operated under monarchical rule. Moreover, the influence of the American Revolution was evident in many political shifts across Europe. From the French Revolution of 1789, the Irish Revolt of 1798, to the Latin American uprisings of the 1830s, all were, in some way, inspired by the American Revolution. Its influence could even be seen in the 20th century decolonization movements across Asia and Africa. In this video, we will delve into the incredible story of the American Revolution. We'll explore how and why Europeans migrated to America, how they formed a distinct society, and what differences emerged between American society and European traditions. We'll also discuss how Europeans in America gradually stopped identifying as Europeans and began to see themselves as Americans. Before discussing the American Revolution, it's important to understand when and why European dissenters began settling in America. The continent was officially discovered in 1492 by the Spanish explorer Christopher Columbus. Though Columbus set out to find a sea route to India, he ended up on an entirely new continent. In reality, Columbus landed on what we now know as the Caribbean Islands, which he named the West Indies, believing them to be part of India. Columbus continued to believe he had discovered a part of India. Later, geographer Amerigo Vespucci conducted a detailed survey of the region and described it as a new world. It was after him that this new continent came to be known as America. To Europeans, it was indeed a new world, as there was no record of it in any of their existing written documents. However, America was already inhabited by native people, whom the Europeans referred to as native Indians or Red Indians. As European settlers expanded across the land, Native Americans were increasingly forced to abandon their territories. Following the discovery of America, European powers raced to exploit the region's resources. They sent armies to displace indigenous populations and began settling their own people in the New World. The aggressive colonization by Europeans was something indigenous communities could not tolerate, and gradually their population began to decline. From as early as the 16th century, European powers started large-scale settlements in the Americas. Spain established colonies in Mexico and South America, while the Portuguese took Brazil. Britain and France, meanwhile, established colonies in what are now the United States and Canada. In the process of establishing colonies, these European powers not only clashed with the native populations, but also competed against one another. By 1732, Britain had established 13 colonies across North America. The first of these was Jamestown, in the state of Virginia, founded in 1607. Over time, 12 more colonies were established. Their names were New Hampshire, New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. The last colony to be settled was Georgia in 1732. These colonies were collectively referred to as New England. It was these 13 colonies that eventually revolted against Britain and declared their independence in 1776. Between 1775 and 1781, several wars were fought between the colonists and Britain, known as the American War of Independence. The Europeans who had settled in America were referred to as colonists or settlers. These wars ended with Britain's defeat, and under the Treaty of Paris in 1783, Britain formally recognized America as an independent nation. But this leads us to a very important question. What were the circumstances that led to such a drastic revolution? The British colonies turned against their own mother country. To understand this, we need to understand the political, economic, and socio-cultural setup of 17th century America. Let's first look at the political setup. Political setup. In all the British colonies, there was a legislature and an executive. These were elected by the local population. At the top was the position of governor or military chief. They were not elected, but directly appointed by Britain. The settled population in these colonies belonged to different parts of Europe. Most of them were of English descent. These people came to America from Europe in search of better economic opportunities. In the beginning, to protect the colonies, Britain fought many times with native Indians and fellow European powers. That's why, in the beginning, the settlers accepted Britain's sovereignty. However, by the 1730s, a distinct American identity had started to emerge. People of the second and third generations, born in America, no longer identified themselves with European identity. Sociocultural and economic development played an important role. So now let's understand the sociocultural setup of 17th century America. Sociocultural setup. American society, compared to Europe, was more liberal and progressive. Religious persecution was a major issue in Europe. In countries where Catholics were in the majority, Protestants were persecuted. In Protestant-majority countries, Catholics were persecuted. America was completely different in this matter. Catholics and Protestants who came from Europe lived peacefully here. Religion was treated as a private matter. One major reason for the absence of religious violence was that, compared to Europe, America was developing from scratch. The colonists did not want to carry any religious baggage with them. Besides this, they were inspired by the Renaissance and Enlightenment movements that had started in Europe. That's why, for them, religion was secondary and a private matter. To promote new ideas and views born out of the Renaissance, American intellectuals established many universities, including Harvard University in 1636, the College of William and Mary in 1693, Yale University in 1700, and the University of Pennsylvania in 1745. They played an important role in spreading rational thoughts and scientific thinking. When the American Revolution started, these universities played an important role in popularizing many new ideas such as republicanism, elections, human rights, free speech, etc. Another special feature of American society was that it had only two classes, rich and poor. Like Europe, there was no nobility or feudal class. No one was given an important position in society based on birth. All positions were earned through merit. Due to this attitude of American society, it became easier to establish a republican government. After the socio-cultural setup, let's now look at the economic setup. America's economic setup was based on capitalist production. It is also called a free market economy, where government involvement is minimal. Goods are produced in the market to earn profits. The people who settled in America from Europe had one main aim: to make economic progress. Since America was a new country, there were many opportunities to develop trade, industry, and agriculture. Within just 150 years of the establishment of the first English colony in 1607, a vibrant capitalist system had already developed in America. Speaking of agricultural production, farmers used to grow crops like tobacco, cotton, and sugarcane, a major portion of which was exported. At the same time, industries like shipbuilding, timber, and mining also witnessed significant progress. The colonies not only traded among themselves, but also exported goods across the Atlantic Ocean to Europe. While the colonists in the 13 colonies were working hard for their economic progress, Britain viewed them from an imperialist perspective. Britain designed trade policies for its American colonies in a way that maximized benefits for the British population, not for the people settled in America. Let's learn about some of Britain's trade policies that increased conflict with the colonies. To regulate American trade and economic activities, the British Parliament passed several acts. Some of these were controversial acts. Navigation Act of 1651, Enumerated Commodities Act of 1660, Staple Act of 1663, Iron Act of 1750, Hat Act and Woolen Act. The 1651 Navigation Act made the use of only British ships mandatory for trade. The 1660 Enumerated Commodities Act forced American colonies to export goods like sugar, tobacco, cotton, and indigo only to Britain. The 1663 Staple Act made it mandatory for goods from the American colonies to be first taken to Britain before being exported to any other country. The Iron Act of 1750, along with the Hat Act and Woolen Act, made it mandatory to import those commodities from Britain, and they could not be manufactured in the American colonies. By the 1750s, it had become clear that Britain was only interested in the prosperity and benefit of its homeland. Its role in the American colonies was mostly to serve British interests. In response to these British policies, some intellectuals from the American colonies organized the Albany Congress in 1754. The objective of this Congress was to oppose British policies and discuss the future political organization of the colonies. Representatives from 7 out of the 13 American colonies took part in this Congress. Here, Benjamin Franklin, an important political leader of America, proposed the creation of an American Union uniting all the colonies. However, this proposal was not accepted at the time. There were many reasons for this, but the main reason was that the American colonies were facing French aggression. The French had settled in areas on the western side of the Mississippi River in North America, but they were trying to capture English colonies. Considering the French threat, the colonies did not want to take any action against Britain that could weaken the British position. That's why Benjamin Franklin's proposal in the Albany Congress was rejected. From 1754 to 1763, Britain and France fought the 7 Years' War. Although Britain won this war, it also planted the seed of the American Revolution. Let's understand how the 17 Years' War later became a reason for the American Revolution. The 17 Years' War and after, from 1756 to 1763, was fought between Britain and France. It was not only fought in America, but also in Europe and India. It played an important role in shaping the politics of the American continent. The main purpose of the 17 Years' War was to secure their respective colonial possessions. In America, on the East Coast under British control, there were 13 colonies which extended west to the Appalachian Mountains. The areas beyond the Appalachian Mountains were under French control. Besides that, from Louisiana in the south to the Great Lakes region in the north, France also had control. Both France and Britain were trying to capture each other's territories and expand their own. The 17 Years' War ended in 1763. France lost the war and had to surrender its North American territories to Britain. But the war did not benefit Britain much either. Because after the 17 Years' War, the policies adopted by Britain ignited a feeling of independence among Americans. Friends, this 7-year war put Britain into heavy debt. To recover this debt, Britain imposed many new taxes on the colonies. Britain believed that the 17 Years' War was in favor of the safety and security of the colonists, so these new taxes were justified. Some of the unpopular taxes and legislations introduced by Britain in America after the 17 Years' War were the Sugar Act of 1764, the Quartering Act of 1764, and the Stamp Act of 1765. Through the Sugar Act of 1764, it was made mandatory for colonists to export sugar only to Britain. The Quartering Act of 1764 put the expense of British soldiers posted in America on the colonists. the Stamp Act of 1765 made it mandatory to pay stamp tax on all legal documents, newspapers, etc. in America. These acts were strongly opposed in the American colonies. Britain considered these taxes valid because they were meant for the protection of the American colonies. But Americans believed that the right to impose taxes should only belong to local legislatures, not the British Parliament. From here came the famous slogan of the American Revolution, "No taxation without representation." Americans believed that since there was not a single American representative in the British Parliament, it had no right to impose taxes on the American colonies. In protest against the Stamp Act, American leader Samuel Adams started an organization called the Sons of Liberty. This organization popularized the issue of independence from Britain in many American cities. For this, committees of correspondence were established. These committees played an important role in organizing the American Revolution. Due to strong opposition to the Stamp Act, Britain had to repeal it. But in 1765, Britain passed the Declaratory Act. The main purpose of this was to declare that only the British Parliament or the British King had the right to make laws for all British colonies. Under this, in 1767, the Townshend Act was passed, through which essential items like tea, paper, glass, lead, and paint were taxed. The Parliament passed the Intolerance Act. Through the Intolerable Acts, all political meetings were banned, and the Boston port was closed until further notice. Until the culprits of the Boston Tea Party were caught, or the damage done in Boston was compensated, the Intolerable Acts remained in effect. In response to the Intolerable Acts, representatives of the American colonies convened the First Continental Congress in 1774. Several important decisions were taken in this Congress, such as boycotting British goods and using domestic goods instead. During this time, many American intellectuals began advocating for independence from Britain among the public. One of the most important was Thomas Paine, whose pamphlet Common Sense became very popular in 1775-1776. In Common Sense, Paine used simple language to explain the benefits of gaining independence from Britain. At the beginning of 1776, all colonies expelled their British representatives and started moving toward self-government. In such a situation, the Second Continental Congress was held in 1776. In this Congress, which took place in Philadelphia, the Declaration of Independence was adopted on July 4th. According to this pledge, the American colonies declared themselves independent from Britain. July 4th is still celebrated as Independence Day in the United States. After this, the American War of Independence was fought between Britain and the American colonies. Britain was led by Lord Cornwallis, while the leader of the American colonies was George Washington. The American colonies also received support from Spain and France because of their old rivalry with Britain. In 1781, with the surrender of Cornwallis at Yorktown, the war came to an end. After that, in 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed between America and Britain, through which Britain recognized American independence. After gaining independence from Britain, the American colonies organized the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787, chaired by George Washington. In the convention, the American Constitution was adopted, which gave birth to a federal American Union. In this way, the 13 American colonies came together and formed the United States of America. Now, let's conclude the video with the significance of the American Revolution. Significance of the American Revolution. The American Revolution gave birth to the world's first Republican state. The American Revolution gave birth to the first Republican state in the world. Republicanism means that the head of the state would not be hereditary. Anyone could reach the country's topmost position based on merit. For this, a regular election process was arranged. At that time, most countries had monarchies. In such a time, this arrangement was revolutionary in itself. For the first time, the American colonies proposed treating all citizens equally. The concept of human rights was born from the American Constitution's Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights granted citizens many freedoms against the state. Later, inspired by this, the chapter on fundamental rights was also added to the Indian Constitution. Apart from this, the American Revolution was also a game-changer for European politics. Its direct impact can be seen in the French Revolution of 1789, where people, inspired by the American Revolution, placed demands of liberty, fraternity, and equality before the French monarchy. The Irish independence movement of 1798 was also inspired by it. The formation of the American state can actually be considered the blueprint for the modern nation-state. Republicanism, human rights, freedom of religion, federalism, the concepts that are the backbone of a modern nation-state, are actually derived from the American Constitution. That is why we can say that the American Revolution gave a new direction to world politics. The formation of a state based on modern principles can be considered the long-lasting achievement of the American Revolution.